the most popular officer on the Indian force.
To identify ways of eliminating nuclear dangers.
Yes.
Is happening against the backdrop of Annan's grand vision of a millennium. As the latest batch of Indian soldiers head for Sierra Leone, we wish them luck in their peacekeeping mission. And we look back at India's role in UN peacekeeping for more than half a century. It's been a long association. Indian troops served in Korea in 1954, then in Vietnam, Congo, Namibia, Yugoslavia, Somalia, Rwanda, Haiti, southern Lebanon, and now in the war zone called Sierra Leone. More than 50,000 Indians have served in over 30 peacekeeping assignments the world over. Some extremely sensitive missions, where UN forces have tried to enforce peace through armed intervention. There have also been conventional peacekeeping missions, where the warring factions have agreed to UN intervention. Somalia had seen unmitigated violence between warring factions in the early 90s. A shaky ceasefire did not bring peace, and in the face of deteriorating conditions in 1992, the UN, consisting largely of American troops, decided to use force to disarm the militia. UN troops suffered casualties, and the UN mission in Somalia, or UNISOM, was declared a failure. At this stage, the mission was given a new mandate, only humanitarian work. It was called UNISOM 2, under which an entire Indian brigade arrived in Somalia. Our boys were at a disadvantage. While the American contingent was armed to the teeth, the Indians entered this dangerous war zone without the right to use arms. Still, what a job they did. They built roads, cared for orphans, dealt with the mounting medical crisis, and struck a special chord in the hearts of the Somalian people. Above all, the Indians managed to maintain political neutrality. Indian peacekeepers played a similar role in Angola, where again they succeeded because they managed to build a rapport with the local community. And in southern Lebanon, caught in the crossfire between Israel and the Hezbollah, even in this cold mountainous region, the Indians managed to keep their spirits buoyant. In Bosnia, they have been engaged in rebuilding this shattered state by retraining the police force of former Yugoslavia into a democratic force. Indian peacekeepers have done it all. In difficult conditions, in the face of danger, they have and continue to bring peace and sanity. In Sierra Leone, the ceiling on UN peacekeeping has now been raised to 13,000, and by mid-June there will be 3,000 Indian peacekeepers among them. But the UN mission in Sierra Leone, or UNAMSIL, commanded by an Indian, faces a problem, because establishing peace here might mean enforcing it. The Revolutionary United Front, led by Foday Sanko, violated the July 99 Peace Pact, which had ended 8 years of civil strife. And it took hundreds of UN personnel, including Indians, hostage. Sanko has now been captured, but the hostage crisis continues. In the eye of this storm over UN's peacekeeping debacle in Sierra Leone is the Secretary General Kofi Annan. All this is happening against the backdrop of Annan's grand vision of a millennial assembly in September to chart out the UN's agenda in the 21st century. But Sierra Leone has put a spanner in the works. What implications does this have for this apex international organization? Secretary General Kofi Annan speaks to Saeed Naqvi at the UN headquarters in New York.
Welcome to Worldview India, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Before I was just going through your very excellent Millennium Report, and I thought that is how I would start this interview. As I got out of the elevator, one of the delegates said, "But do you know that Foday Sanko has been captured?" And that somehow warped my mind a bit. Now, where is Foday Sanko? What is the story, the latest?
He's been held by the Sierra Leonean government. He's in their custody, and he was wounded, but apparently he's been operated and he's well. We, on the other hand, are continuing with our operations. We are given high priority to release of the soldiers who've been detained. And then we are moving on with consolidation, trying to stabilize the situation and bringing in reinforcements so that we can continue with our work for peace.
If Foday Sanko, the rebel RUF leader, has been arrested or captured, who is controlling the other, how many?
RUF forces.
Yes.
The figures, we have a figure of about between 6,000 to 15,000 RUF fighters. Obviously, President Taylor of Liberia, who's been working with us in negotiating the release of the detainees, has been dealing with other commanders in the field who have released about 158 hostages. So somebody has moved in to fill the bridge, and we are going to keep the leadership responsible for releasing the rest of the...
How many are still in their custody?
About 300.
Indians?
I think the Indians have been released.
What maximum number of those detainees are from?
Zambia. There are about 200 Zambians who are still detained. They are good soldiers. They had just arrived and got caught in an ambush.
Is there a degree of coordination between the peacekeeping forces, the leader of the peacekeeping forces, and the political leadership now in control in Freetown?
Yes.
On this whole issue of the capture of Foday Sanko?
Yes, there is. They are in touch. It's not just General Jetley, who is a very good officer and doing a good job, but we also have a political representative, the special representative of the Secretary General, Mr. Adeniji. The two of them are coordinating these efforts with the Sierra Leonean authorities and the forces on the ground.
You said something about General Jetley. In fact, you have such experience of peacekeeping before you were elevated to your present station. What has been your experience of Indian contribution to peacekeeping, Indian peacekeeping forces in southern Lebanon, Somalia, Angola, police forces in Haiti, and so on? Could you enumerate?
I have always maintained that a good peacekeeper is a well-trained and a well-equipped soldier. So a good, well-trained soldier is the best peacekeeper you can get. Peacekeeping requires discipline, self-restraint, and ability to work with others. India has produced some of the best peacekeepers we've had, not only in terms of rank and file, but also in the leadership. In Somalia, where we ran a very difficult operation, the Indian contingent, brigade that occupied Baidoa, was able to establish perhaps one of the most peaceful corners in that troubled land. And that battalion, under good leadership, became very popular with the population because they don't limit themselves to sort of military activities alone. They realize you have to work with the population. And ironically enough, the most popular officer on the Indian force was not the force commander or the public relations man. It was a vet, because he went around looking after their camels, their cattle, giving them advice, giving them medication. So the population accepted and worked and cooperated with them. We've had, they've done a very good job in Lebanon, as you've said. We had the General Nambia, who was our force commander in Yugoslavia during the difficult days there. So we consider Indian soldiers very highly, and they are amongst the best peacekeepers. And so I'm not surprised that Jetley and the men on the ground have done the good job that they have done. They've come prepared and well trained. And I'm grateful to the government of India and the people of India for making these able men and women available.
There was a little bit of an unfortunate controversy in India, apparently, about General Jetley. Something was attributed to you. How did that come about?
You know, I think it was a reference to an article in the New York Times. But what people do not know that I've been on the phone with Jetley. I've even spoken to the Prime Minister about the contribution of Jetley and the Indian force.
You've spoken to Mr. Vajpayee?
Vajpayee. I spoke to Mr. Vajpayee during the crisis, thanking him for the men he's made available and commending the performance of Jetley. This was before the article.
Mr. Vajpayee, of course, has already announced that he will be here on the 6th, 7th, and 8th for the Millennial Assembly, which is your very excellent idea. Now, on the one hand, you have this very superb vision as outlined in this document which I've been reading. On the other, there is this sort of mess in peacekeeping, the complications in peacekeeping. With the United Nations in the 21st century.
Let me say that peacekeeping, as much publicity as it gets, is a very small part of UN's activities. And in fact, the Millennium Report gives an idea of the range of UN's activities and operations. While some of our work in the economic and social and legal aspects do not get publicity, 80% of our resources and efforts as a UN system goes into economic and social and norm setting, whether in aviation, whether in a trade law branch, whether in establishment of treaties and conventions. So we do lots of work.
Can you just list 2 or 3 items that you placed before the heads of governments at the Millennial Assembly? Strengthening the capacity of the United Nations to conduct peace operations. Now, this is elementary. And that precisely is the problem.
That is a problem. In fact, you would notice that when the operations in Sierra Leone got into crisis, my first appeal was for a rapid reaction force. The term rapid reaction force implies speed, capacity, and ability to act quickly. I expected the countries with capacity, with the rich, and with the well-equipped armies to respond. They did not. Luckily, the British went in, although with a limited objective. Their presence reinforced our troops and, in effect, provided the kind of capacity I had expected the rapid reaction force to come in with. If peacekeeping is going to be effective, the member states have to give to the United Nations the means to carry out its mandates.
Who are these people with the capacity on the one hand? You have been saying this for a long while, sir. The United States, which is the most powerful country and which has been, once upon a time, the biggest contributor. 0 fatality. They don't want to lose a single life. They don't want to commit a soldier. And the Congress will not put in any money. So, with all your lamentations, what progress is possible?
I think what is important is that obviously governments may accept international responsibility, and it may not always be in a position for one reason or the other to put troops on the ground. But I think we do have a responsibility to help those who are prepared to do it in terms of equipment, financing, and others to do that. And there are governments who have well-trained men, but for budgetary reasons often do not have the equipment. There have been quite a lot of discussion about developing regional capacity. For about 3-5 years, we've been talking a lot about African rapid reaction capacity, strengthening African capacity. Not much has happened. Now, under Sierra Leone, governments are talking about equipping West African troops so that they can go in. It's not of any help to me.
Go in where? Go in
Sierra Leone. But that takes time to equip an army and then inject them into a theater. You require a couple of months. But when I appealed for rapid reaction, I needed it then, not in 3-4 months' time.
Part of the problem, apparently, is this whole lust for diamonds. It is said that both sides, in fact, are interested in having control on those diamond mines. If you go to Angola, Jonas Savimbi will not give up because he is controlling the diamond area. The crisis in the Congo is also. Are we therefore facing a diamond war in all of Africa at this point in time?
I think the Council and the UN is beginning to tackle this issue of war profiteers and the need to really not only try and contain the problem of exploitation at the national level, but also put pressure on the companies that buy these diamonds and market them to be responsible to the international community and broader values than market considerations. I would hope that in Sierra Leone down the line, as we work with the government to expand governmental administration throughout the territory, the diamond area will come under governmental territory. Concessions, I hope, will be given to companies that can mine these gems professionally, set up their own securities to protect the area, and the government will earn its income through taxation and use the resources for the benefit of all Sierra Leoneans, not one lord or the other. And in fact, this is how the peacekeepers got confronted, because when General Jetli and the men took over, he was able to deploy troops to regions that ECOMOG troops had never been deployed to. Mm-hmm. And obviously, further strategy was to become president through the ballot or the bullet. And if that is the strategy, then he wasn't going to give up his weapons, nor give up the diamond mines that funds the war and his men. And so we were really cut into the bone, now moving to hit him where it hurts.
You know, since the Americans and all the other major powers are so attached to their skins that they will not commit their soldiers, maybe the diamond dividend might be tossed up as an incentive to the Congress. They might then commit some soldiers.
I will leave you to say that. I wouldn't be drawn on that.
Right. In fact, let me go back to another piece in your democracy seems to be a theme that is picking up. It was always mentioned, it was always a value, but now it is gathering momentum. There is this, at the Durban summit of the Commonwealth, democracy was a high value. That's and correct. Non-democratic governments were kept out of it. And now we have India and the United States in leadership positions talking of a community of democracies, and the conference is taking place in Warsaw. If democracy
I'll be there.
Sorry?
I'll be there.
You are going to be very much there. In fact, of course, that's why I mentioned it to you.
Yeah.
Now, if democracy is a value to be spread and proselytized globally, how can you have absence of it within the functioning of the United Nations?
I take it you are referring to the Security Council reform.
That is exactly what I'm talking about.
No, I think everyone. Let me say that I think the argument of democracy or lack of it applied to the United Nations, we have to be a bit more nuanced here, in that the Charter is something that all the member states agreed on democratically. But they also all realize today that the Security Council has to be reformed, and that the composition and the membership of the Council today reflects the geopolitical realities of 1945, and that we need to reform the Council to give it greater representation and therefore greater legitimacy. There are those who are worried that if you expand the Council and make it too large, it will not be effective. I believe that it is not beyond human ingenuity and creativity to reform the Council in a manner that it will be small enough to be effective, but large enough to be seen as more representative and therefore with greater legitimacy.
Where is India in that framework?
But because the member states are discussing this quite a lot. I think when it comes to India, when you discuss, one of the proposals has been there should be 5 new additional permanent members, 2 additional seats for the industrialized countries, and 3 for the developed countries, 1 for Asia, 1 for Latin America, and 1 for Africa. Of course, the Africans have indicated they want 2. When it comes to the Indian seats, even though the decision will have to be taken by members, I think there's a sense amongst large numbers of membership that India will be natural for consideration of such a seat.
So one final question on to examine, the Assembly will examine the possibility of convening a major international conference to identify ways of eliminating nuclear dangers. Yes. How popular are you for having mooted that idea?
I think with large numbers of the membership, the idea is very popular. And I think during the NPT, quite a few of them commented on it. But it is not entirely popular with the nuclear powers.
This dignity of the South has been one issue, and this is the final question, because I have taken a great deal of your time. Now, I was just in the Silicon Valley, where suddenly I saw Indians, 30,000 Indians who have become, who are 30,000 millionaires in the space of, in this information.
Relatively short period, yeah.
In information technology. So do you think that might be, that gives you hope that this sort of the dignity of the South might be, the intellectual property might eventually level things out?
I'm very excited about that because for two reasons. First of all, when it comes to intelligence and brains, it is one commodity that is evenly distributed. It's not limited to one region, one race, or whatever. It's a question of resources and ability to harness and train and educate these people around the world. India has demonstrated that with good education and application, the third world countries can become competent and proficient in high tech. When I look at what has happened in Bangalore, where Bangalore today is a high-tech city with over 300 high-tech companies, not to mention the engineers who are here, people sitting in India developing software material and shipping it via electronically to US to companies. And besides, investments, there are kinds of financial investment required for one to get started in these internet or new technology areas. It's not as capital intensive as it was in the old industrial efforts. So I would hope we can use this new technology in the South, using the talent we have to leapfrog some of the painful development processes others had to go through. So there is a great deal of hope. India can do a lot for others in the third world countries, but there are others in the developed world who can also assist. So that is my hope.
Sir, I've taken so much of your time. I'll be very unpopular with your staff.
I see they're giving you eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.